The distress signal. In the vastness of space, where stars twinkled like distant memories, a haunting signal pierced the silence. It was a cry for help, desperate and filled with despair. Millions had perished, and hope had vanished from the once peaceful world of Vulcan. The Vulcan homeworld, known for its serenity and wisdom, now lay in ruins after a brutal alien invasion. The message traveled through the cosmos, reaching Earth's United Space Command, a beacon of urgency that would not be ignored. Captain Eugene Miller stood on the bridge of the USS Salvation, his weathered face reflecting the weight of his responsibilities. A decorated veteran known for his unorthodox tactics, he was determined to do whatever it took to save those who remained. As he listened to the distress signal echo in his mind, he felt the familiar pang of resolve ignite within him. This mission would test not only his leadership, but also the limits of human ingenuity. The crew worked with a palpable tension, each person acutely aware of the stakes. They had intercepted the Vulcan transmission just in time. The enormity of the task ahead loomed large as the USS Salvation entered Vulcan space. Long-range scans revealed devastation on an unimaginable scale. Cities that once stood proud were now nothing more than smoldering ruins. Smoke billowed into the atmosphere, a grave reminder of the horrors that had unfolded. "Sir, we've detected a Vulcan escape pod," Lieutenant Zhang announced, her voice slicing through the tense atmosphere. "Initiating emergency rescue protocol." "Good work, Lieutenant. Lock onto that pod," Captain Miller commanded, his heart racing. The ship's tractor beam engaged, drawing the pod into the docking bay. Medical teams were already prepared, their movements swift and practiced. When the pod was finally extracted, the crew found a critically wounded Vulcan scientist inside. "Get her to Med Bay, stat," Dr. Potel shouted, leading the team as they rushed through the ship's corridors. The advanced medical bay hummed with activity as they worked to stabilize the injured scientist. Captain Miller arrived just in time to see the Vulcan's face, pale and drawn. "She's stabilizing, but barely," Dr. Potel said, concern etched in her features. "Her name is Juno, and she appears to possess vital information about the invaders." Miller nodded, his mind already racing. This was the key. He gathered his senior staff for an emergency strategy session, knowing that every moment counted. "We need to infiltrate the command structure of the invaders," he stated, his eyes sharp. "Disable it from within. That's our only shot at turning the tide." As if on cue, Dr. Purtell's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, Juno is awake and asking for you. She says she has critical intelligence on the invaders." Miller rushed to Juno's bedside. As their eyes met, he saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. The Vulcan scientist spoke, her voice strained but clear. "You must understand, the Kreldnaks are not just conquerors. They're harvesting our people for genetic material. We are their prey." The implications of her words settled heavily in the air. Captain Miller felt the weight of countless lives pressing down on him. Together, they might devise a plan that combined human adaptability with Vulcan intelligence, a strategy potent enough to save millions. As Juno shared her knowledge, Miller's mind raced with possibilities. They were the last hope, unexpected saviors in a moment of darkness. The crew of the USS Salvation stood ready to prove that when all seemed lost, humanity would come to the rescue. With newfound determination, Miller's gaze swept across the bridge. "Prepare the infiltration team. We launch in 10 minutes. "Captain, we're ready," Lieutenant Zhang replied, her fingers flying across her console as the ship's cloaking technology engaged. "We're invisible to their sensors." The view screen displayed the devastation of the Vulcan homeworld, a stark reminder of their mission. Miller felt a tightness in his chest as he prepared to lead the charge into the heart of enemy territory. They launched in their specially designed shuttle, gliding silently through the atmosphere. The destruction was even more painful to witness up close. Once majestic cities lay in ruins, smoke rising from the remnants of what had been a thriving civilization. But Miller knew they had a job to do. "Stay focused," he reminded his team. We have a mission to complete. As they landed in a secluded area near the alien command center, Dr. Chen activated his tricorder, the device beeping urgently. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy shield surrounding the facility," he reported, his brow furrowing. "There's a fluctuation in the shield's frequency. If we time it right, we might be able to create a small opening." "Do it," Miller commanded, trusting in his crew's skills. Dr. Chen worked feverishly, his fingers dancing across the device's controls. Suddenly, a shimmering distortion appeared in the air. "Now," Chen shouted. The team darted forward, squeezing through the narrow gap just as the shield snapped back into place behind them. They had made it inside, but the real challenges were only beginning. Crouching behind a pile of rubble, Miller surveyed their surroundings. Alien guards, their insectoid forms towering over the landscape, patrolled in regular patterns. In the distance, he saw groups of Vulcans herded into what appeared to be labor camps. The sight churned in his stomach. The urgency of their mission had never felt more critical. A sudden movement caught his eye, and before he knew it, he found himself pinned to the ground, a blade pressed against his throat. Looking up, he met the fierce eyes of a Vulcan woman, her face a mask of determination. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "Why have you come here?" Miller held her gaze, unflinching. "I'm Captain Eugene Miller of the USS Salvation. We're here to help." The Vulcan's eyes narrowed, skepticism etched on her features. "Help? Where were you when our world burned?" For a moment, they held each other's gaze, the weight of their respective worlds heavy in the air. Finally, the Vulcan woman removed the blade from his throat. "I am Tara, leader of what remains of the Vulcan resistance." As Miller's team regrouped, he quickly explained their mission. Tara listened intently, her skepticism gradually giving way to cautious hope. "Your plan is logical," she conceded, "but infiltrating the command center will not be easy. I can provide you with information about its layout and the aliens' patrol patterns." With Tara's intelligence, the team devised a new strategy. They would split into two groups. Miller and Tara would target the central control room, while Chen and Hawkins would plant explosives as a diversion. As they made their final preparations, Miller overheard a nearby alien communication device. His universal translator struggled with the complex language, but what he heard sent chills down his spine. "Captain," he called urgently to Chen. "Can you make sense of this?" Chen listened intently, his face growing pale. "Captain, it's worse than we thought. The Kraldnaks aren't just conquering Vulcan, they're harvesting Vulcans for genetic material. They're using it to enhance their own species." A heavy silence fell over the group. Tara's usually stoic expression cracked, revealing a flash of raw anguish. "Then we have no time to lose," Miller declared. "Let's move out." With Tara's guidance, they navigated the facility, moving swiftly through the shadows. Their unlikely partnership already proved formidable as they approached the command center's entrance. Suddenly, a pair of Kraldnaks guards blocked their path. Without hesitation, Miller and Tara sprang into action. Miller's years of combat training blended seamlessly with Tara's Vulcan martial arts. In seconds, the guards lay unconscious at their feet, and they pressed on, fighting through increasingly heavy resistance. As they neared the central control room, a barrage of energy weapon fire forced them to take cover. With pinned down, Miller shouted over the din of battle. Tara's eyes darted around, assessing their options. In a blur of motion, she vaulted over their cover, drawing the aliens' fire. Miller seized the opportunity, flanking their attackers and taking them down with precision shots. But as the last Kraldnaks fell, he felt a searing pain in his side. Looking down, he saw a scorch mark on his uniform, blood seeping through the fabric. "Tara," he gasped, but she was at his side in an instant, applying pressure to the wound. Just then, they reached the doors of the central control room when a massive explosion rocked the facility. Chen and Hawkins had detonated their charges right on schedule. Taking advantage of the chaos, Miller and Tara breached the control room, coming face to face with the Kreltnak's commander, a monstrous, multi-limbed creature that towered over them. The alien's enhanced strength and reflexes made it a terrifying opponent. Miller and Tara fought with everything they had, their movements perfectly synchronized despite his injury. Driven by human tenacity, Miller surged forward. Tara's Vulcan discipline allowed her to anticipate and counter the creature's attacks. In a final desperate move, Miller feigned left while Tara struck from the right, catching the Kreltnak's commander off guard. With a swift, powerful blow, they subdued the commander. Miller rushed to the central console, his fingers flying across the alien controls as he initiated the shutdown sequence for the Kreltnak's defense systems. Tara took up a defensive position at the entrance, her stolen Kreltnak's weapon blazing as she warded off any incoming enemies. The countdown began, a low hum echoing through the room. "We have only moments before this place goes up in flames," Tara shouted, urgency filling her voice. "We need to get the Vulcans out now." Miller's heart raced. With the command center collapsing, the opportunity to save the remaining Vulcan captives was slipping away. But they had bought themselves time, a precious commodity they couldn't afford to waste. With a final flourish, the console went dark, and Miller turned to Tara, determination etched into every line of his face. "Let's finish this, for Vulcan." As they fought their way back through the chaos, Miller felt a sense of purpose solidify within him. He and his crew were not just humans in a foreign land. They were warriors fighting for the freedom of an entire civilization. And with Juno's intelligence, Tara's leadership, and the resilience of the U.S. Salvation's crew, they might just pull off the impossible. Together, they would turn the tide of battle. Together, they would be the last hope for Vulcan. The echoes of chaos reverberated through the hallways of the Kreltnak's command center as Captain Eugene Miller and Tara fought their way back toward the holding cells where the captured Vulcans were imprisoned. The urgency of their mission weighed heavily on them, each second precious as the facility began to buckle under the strain of their explosive diversion. Miller glanced at Tara, her Vulcan composure unyielding despite the chaos surrounding them. "How far to the holding cells?" he asked, his breath coming in quick bursts. "Through the east corridor and past the reactor core," she replied, her voice steady despite the frantic energy. "We need to move quickly. The alarms will bring reinforcements." The pair navigated the labyrinthine corridors, weaving through debris and avoiding alien patrols. The dimly lit passageways were a far cry from the brilliant Vulcan sky. As they approached the reactor core, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet, a constant reminder that time was running out. "Hold up," Miller whispered, gesturing for Tara to stop. Ahead, a group of Kreltnak soldiers blocked their path. They were larger and more heavily armed than the guards they had faced before, a formidable barrier to their objective. Tara's eyes narrowed, and she assessed their options. "We need a distraction," she said, her Vulcan logic driving their strategy. "If we can split their attention, we can slip past." Miller nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. He quickly reached for a small device on his utility belt, a mini explosive, one he had intended for breaching doors. "I'll set this off a few meters away. It should draw their focus." "Make it count," Tara urged, stepping back into the shadows. With deft hands, Miller positioned the explosive around the corner, then activated it with a quick tap. The device emitted a series of loud beeps before erupting in a thunderous blast, sending vibrations through the air. The Kreltnak soldiers immediately turned toward the source of the noise, their attention diverted. "Now," Miller hissed, and they sprinted past the soldiers, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The corridor opened up into the reactor core chamber, a vast, domed space filled with pulsing machinery that glowed ominously in shades of red and green. "Over there," Tara pointed to a series of locked doors at the far end of the chamber, the heavy steel marked with the symbols of the Kreltnak's empire. "That's where they're holding the Vulcans." Miller's heart raced as he dashed toward the doors, scanning the area for any signs of reinforcements. They could hear the distant shouts of Kreltnak's soldiers as they regained their composure. With each step, the urgency pressed down upon them. Reaching the doors, Miller quickly examined the locking mechanism. "It's a biometric lock," he muttered, frustration creeping in. "We need a Kreltnak's handprint to override it." "Stand back," Tara said, stepping forward. With a swift motion, she drew her weapon and aimed it at the panel. "This will do the trick." "Wait," Miller shouted, but it was too late. The blast echoed like thunder as she shot the lock. The door buckled under the impact, swinging open with a metallic groan. "Stand back," Tara said, stepping forward. With a swift motion, she drew her weapon and aimed it at the panel. "This will do the trick." "Wait," Miller shouted, but it was too late. The blast echoed like thunder as she shot the lock. The door buckled under the impact, swinging open with a metallic groan. Inside, rows of Vulcan prisoners stared back at them, eyes wide with disbelief. Some were injured, others visibly shaken, but all were trapped in a nightmare. The sight filled Miller with a fierce determination. "We're here to rescue you," he called, urgency in his voice. "Get ready to move." The Vulcans exchanged hesitant glances, still in shock from the abruptness of their rescue. Tara stepped inside, her voice soothing yet firm. "We must act quickly. The Kreltnaks will soon realize we're here." Miller moved through the cells, using a small plasma cutter to free the trapped Vulcans. "This is going to take some time," he said as he worked. "We need to secure the area." Tara positioned herself at the entrance, her keen senses attuned to the sounds of approaching soldiers. "We have a few minutes, but not long. I suggest we arm these Vulcans." "Good idea," Miller replied, quickly gathering discarded weapons from the room. He passed them out, ensuring everyone was equipped and ready for a fight. As the last of the Vulcans was freed, a thunderous crash echoed through the corridor behind them. The Kreltnak soldiers had regrouped, and they were coming fast. "We've got company," Tara shouted, raising her weapon. "Form a defensive line," Miller barked, rallying the freed Vulcans. He felt a surge of hope. If they could hold off the Kreltnaks long enough, they might just make it out alive. "Stay close to us." The first wave of Kreltnak soldiers burst into the room, weapons drawn. A firefight erupted, laser blasts illuminating the dark space. Tara moved with lethal precision, her shots finding their marks as Miller fought alongside her, directing the Vulcans to fire at will. "Push them back," Miller shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Vulcans rallied, their own instincts kicking in. Despite their initial hesitation, they fought bravely, fueled by the urgency of their situation. The battle raged on, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt metal. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, the tide began to turn. With the Kreltnaks advancing in droves, Miller knew they had to act quickly. "Retreat back to the reactor core," he yelled. "We'll make our stand there." Fighting their way backward, they maneuvered through the chaos, the Vulcans forming a tight defensive formation around Miller and Tara. As they reached the reactor chamber, Miller could see the intensity of the battle shifting. "Seal the doors," Tara ordered, and a few Vulcans rushed to comply, barricading the entrance as best they could. The weight of the door shuddered under the relentless pounding of the Kreltnaks outside. "Now what?" one of the Vulcans asked, panting from exertion. Miller's mind raced. "We need to overload the reactor. It'll create a chain reaction and buy us the time we need to escape." Tara nodded, understanding the plan. "Then we'll have to create a diversion while someone stays behind to initiate the overload." "I'll stay," Miller said, determination fueling his voice. "I'll set the overload sequence, but I'll need cover fire." "I'll stay with you," Tara replied, her gaze unwavering. "We'll hold them off together." The rest of the Vulcans nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthened by Miller's bravery. They spread out, taking positions along the walls as the Kreltnaks hammered against the doors, their growls and shouts echoing ominously. "Get ready," Miller shouted as the doors finally gave way, bursting open with a deafening crash. Kreltnak's soldiers swarmed into the chamber, their eyes filled with rage and hunger. Miller activated the reactor control panel, his fingers dancing across the buttons as he input the overload sequence. The lights flickered, and the ground trembled as the machinery began to hum ominously. "We don't have much time," he yelled over the din of battle. Tara fought with fierce precision, taking down Kreltnaks after Kreltnaks as they flooded into the reactor core. "We need to hold them back," she shouted, firing round after round with deadly accuracy. "Almost there," Miller called, the console beeping as the sequence reached the critical stage. "Just a few more seconds." But the Kreltnaks pressed on, relentless in their pursuit. Miller could feel the pressure mounting as the countdown clock on the console ticked away. "Hurry, Tara," he urged, sweat beading on his forehead. With a final surge of strength, Tara unleashed a flurry of shots, her resolve unwavering even as the soldiers closed in. "This is it," she shouted as the console began to flash warning lights. Miller pressed the final button, initiating the reactor overload. "Now, let's get out of here." The reactor began to rumble ominously, the air vibrating with energy. "Fall back," Tara yelled, moving to grab Miller's arm. They raced toward the exit, the Vulcans following in their wake. Explosions rocked the chamber, flames licking at their heels as they sprinted down the corridor. Miller could feel the heat building behind them, the reactor core unstable and volatile. They reached the main exit just as the ground shook violently, debris falling around them. "Keep moving," Miller urged, his voice strained but urgent. As they burst through the exit and into the open air, a deafening roar erupted behind them. The command center exploded in a massive fireball, sending a shockwave that propelled them forward. Miller turned back just in time to see the Kreltnaks' command center engulfed in flames, a testament to their victory. Panting, they regrouped outside, the devastated landscape of Vulcan stretching before them. The sight was overwhelming, but Miller focused on the immediate task at hand. "We need to get to the shuttle. It's our only way off this planet." Tara nodded, scanning the area for threats. "We must move quickly. The Kreltnaks will be hunting for us." As they made their way toward the shuttle, they encountered pockets of resistance. A small band of Kreltnaks had survived the explosion and were now searching for them. "We'll need to fight our way through," Miller said, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The Vulcans, now emboldened by their earlier victory, took up defensive positions. The air was thick with tension as they prepared for the battle ahead. "We've come too far to fail now," Tara said, her voice steady and calm. Miller took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "For Vulcan," he shouted, rallying the crew. The Vulcans echoed his battle cry, determination shining in their eyes. As the Kreltnaks charged, the Vulcans unleashed a flurry of shots. Miller fought alongside them, every pulse of his weapon fueled by the hope of their survival. The battle was fierce, the sounds of gunfire and alien roars mixing into a symphony of chaos. With every fallen Kreltnaks, Miller felt their odds improve. They pushed forward, inching closer to the shuttle. Finally, they reached the open bay, the vessel waiting like a beacon of hope. "Get inside," Miller ordered, covering their retreat as the last of the Vulcans clambered aboard. Tara was right behind him, her weapon still blazing as they held off the encroaching aliens. Once inside, Miller wasted no time. He rushed to the controls, initiating the pre-flight sequence. The engines roared to life, a sound that filled him with both relief and urgency. "Are we clear?" Tara called from her position at the hatch, firing at the last few Kreltnak soldiers trying to board. "Almost," Miller shouted back, his fingers flying across the console. "Just a few more seconds." With a final push, Tara dove into the shuttle, slamming the hatch shut just as a Kreltnak soldier lunged for them. "Go, go, go," she yelled. The shuttle surged into the air, the thrusters blasting as they broke free from the chaos below. Miller could see the devastation of the command center receding, the flames still licking the sky as they ascended. "Status report," Miller barked, his heart racing from the adrenaline of battle. "Engines at full power. We're clear of the atmosphere." Tara replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But we need to plot a course. The Kreltnax will be after us." "On it." Miller focused on the controls, plotting a course toward the nearest safe planet. The weight of their success hung heavy in the air. He had never thought they could accomplish such a daring rescue. As they broke free of the gravitational pull, the stars glittered in the void ahead. It was a stark contrast to the devastation they had just witnessed. "Miller," Tara said, her voice softer now, "we did it. We saved them." Miller nodded, a smile breaking through the exhaustion on his face. "But this isn't over. We have to regroup, prepare for whatever comes next." The Vulcans were silent, taking in the enormity of their escape. For the first time, Miller felt a sense of camaraderie among them, an understanding that transcended species. They had fought together, united by a common cause. As they set their course for safety, Miller realized this was just the beginning. The battle against the Kreltnax was far from over. But as long as they stood together, they had hope. And hope was a powerful weapon in itself. The shuttle glided silently through the void of space, the stars glimmering like distant diamonds. Inside, Captain Eugene Miller and the group of Vulcans took a moment to catch their breath, the adrenaline of their narrow escape slowly ebbing away. They were safe for the moment, but the battle had left its mark, both physically and emotionally. As the shuttle's systems hummed with life, Miller looked around at his companions. The Vulcans, once stoic and reserved, now wore expressions of fatigue mixed with relief. They had endured a harrowing ordeal, and he could see the toll it had taken on them. "Everyone report in," he said, his voice steady despite the fatigue weighing on him. Tara stepped forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. "All Vulcans accounted for, Captain. We lost none of our number during the rescue." "That's a victory in itself," Miller replied, relief flooding through him. "But we need to assess the situation. We can't stay in this shuttle forever. The Kreltnax will be looking for us." Tara nodded, her Vulcan logic taking over. "We should plot a course to a nearby planet for repairs and to strategize our next move. Their forces will likely regroup after the attack." Miller's gaze drifted to the control panel. "I'll set a course for the closest habitable planet. We need to find a safe place to land and regroup." As he worked on the navigation system, he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had led them through the chaos, but what awaited them now was uncertain. The Vulcans were looking to him as their leader, and he needed to rise to the occasion. "Captain," one of the Vulcans spoke up, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "What do you propose we do once we reach the planet?" Miller paused, considering his words carefully. "We need to assess the Kreltnax threat. They won't take our escape lightly. We have to anticipate their moves and plan accordingly." Tara chimed in, her logical mind analyzing the situation. "It would also be prudent to establish communication with any nearby allies. If we can gain support, our chances of countering the Kreltnax will improve significantly." "Agreed," Miller said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's make contact with the Federation. They need to know what we've uncovered about the Kreltnax operations." As the shuttle entered the orbit of the planet, a vibrant blue and green sphere came into view. It was a lush world, teeming with life, and for a moment, the beauty of it almost overshadowed the grim reality they faced. Miller set the shuttle down in a clearing surrounded by dense foliage, the engines whirring down as the landing gear touched the ground. "Let's get to work," he said, rising from his seat. "Tara, you and I will establish a communications link. The rest of you can start assessing the shuttle for any damages." The Vulcans nodded, moving quickly to begin their tasks. Miller and Tara made their way to the communication console, a familiar sense of determination washing over them. Accessing Federation channels, Tara stated as she worked, her fingers deftly flying over the controls. We should be able to reach them if the signal is strong enough. Good, Miller replied, watching as the screens flickered to life. We need to let them know the Krelnaks are planning something big. We can't let them gain any more ground. The console beeped, and Tara's brow furrowed as she worked. The signal is weak. I can amplify it, but it may attract unwanted attention. Miller hesitated, weighing their options. We don't have a choice. If we don't reach out, we'll be on our own. Tara nodded, her expression resolute. Then I will amplify the signal. As she worked, Miller's mind drifted to the Krelnaks. Their ruthless nature had become painfully clear, and he knew that their escape would only be the beginning of a larger conflict. He felt the burden of leadership heavy on his shoulders. Signal amplified, Tara announced, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Establishing contact now. The console crackled, and a moment later, a familiar face appeared on the screen. Admiral Krellin, a seasoned officer of the Federation. His expression was stern, but there was a glimmer of relief in his eyes. Miller, is that you? The Admiral said, his voice filled with concern. What's your status? We've made it out, Admiral, Miller replied, his voice steady. But we have urgent intel regarding the Krelnaks. They've established a significant operation on Vulcan, and we believe they're planning a larger assault. Krellin's expression hardened. What kind of operation? They've been capturing Vulcans for their own purposes, experimenting, weaponizing, Miller said, his voice low. We need immediate assistance to prevent further incursions. The Admiral's brow furrowed as he listened intently. We'll mobilize a fleet immediately, but we need proof of their operations. Can you provide it? We have some data from their command center, Tara interjected. We'll compile it and transmit it as soon as we can. Good, Krellin replied. We'll need to coordinate our efforts with other nearby forces. The Krelnaks are more dangerous than we initially anticipated. Miller felt a surge of determination. We can hold them off until reinforcements arrive, but we need to move quickly. Understood, Krellin said. Stay alert and keep your comms open. We'll contact you as soon as we're ready to deploy. With that, the transmission ended, leaving Miller and Taro with a renewed sense of purpose. The Federation would be mobilizing, but they needed to prepare for the inevitable Krelnaks retaliation. Let's gather the others, Miller said, rising from the console. We need to brief everyone on the situation and our next steps. As they exited the cockpit, Miller could see the Vulcans working diligently, inspecting the shuttle and preparing supplies. The atmosphere was charged with energy, the gravity of their situation settling over them like a storm cloud. Everyone, gather around, Miller called, his voice firm. The Vulcans paused in their tasks and assembled in a circle, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. We've established contact with the Federation. They're mobilizing a fleet to assist us, but we need to be prepared for a potential counterattack from the Krelnaks. Tara stepped forward. We need to assess our resources and strategize. Our goal is to fortify our position and ensure the Krelnaks cannot gain access to any more Vulcans. One of the Vulcans, a tall figure with sharp features, spoke up. We should set up defensive perimeters around the shuttle. We cannot allow the Krelnaks to catch us off guard. Agreed, Miller replied. Let's divide into teams. Some of us will work on defenses, while others will prepare the data we gathered from the command center for transmission to the Federation. With a plan in place, the Vulcans sprang into action, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Miller felt a surge of pride watching them work together. They were united in their resolve, a force to be reckoned with. As they set to work, Miller turned to Tara. I'm glad you're here, he said sincerely. I don't think I could do this without you. Tara raised an eyebrow, her expression softening slightly. It is logical to stand together in the face of adversity, but your leadership has been vital in our survival. He appreciated her words, but he knew that the real test lay ahead. The Krelnaks would not rest, and neither could they. As the sun dipped below the horizon of the alien planet, casting a warm glow of the landscape, Miller took a moment to breathe. He stepped away from the hustle of preparations, his mind racing with thoughts of the coming storm. Just then, a distant rumble echoed through the air, causing him to tense. He turned to see a plume of smoke rising on the horizon. His heart sank. The Krelnaks had already begun their assault. "Tara," he shouted, rushing back to the group. "We have incoming. Defensive positions now." The Vulcans sprang into action, taking up their weapons and moving to the perimeter as the distant sound of engines rolled closer. Miller felt the weight of urgency settle over him like a shroud. They had to hold their ground. As the first Krelnaks ships appeared on the horizon, dark shapes against the vibrant sunset, Miller's heart raced. He knew they were outnumbered, but he also knew they had something the Krelnaks didn't: the element of surprise and the resolve to fight for their freedom. "Prepare for engagement," he commanded, positioning himself alongside Tara. The Vulcans took their places, ready to defend their new home against the oncoming storm. The Krelnaks ships descended, their ominous silhouettes growing larger as they approached. Miller steadied his breath, focusing on the task at hand. This was it. This was their moment to stand together against the darkness. The fight for their survival was just beginning.